As everybody knows, Airbus A380 and Boeing 747 are no longer in production. The biggest passenger aircraft that is currently still in production is the Airbus A350-1000, as the last Boeing 777-300ER left the Boeing factory in Everett on 30th September 2021. That is bound to change once the 777X is delivered, a moment many airlines are eagerly awaiting. So even though you might think that the era of large passenger jetliners is definitely over, the situation is in reality a lot more complicated. And how would you react to the fact that commercial airliners are actually getting bigger, at least in the narrow-body sector? Let's see what are the reasons for this, as there are quite a few. But first, I would ask you to think about your flights that you have taken, let's say around 10 or 20 years ago. They were almost definitely operated by a smaller aircraft than the ones that fly on this route today, or they were at least less cramped. Now think about planes that are no longer with us, or at least in the US or in Europe. For example, BA 146, Fokker 70 or 100, Boeing 737 Classic. There are also ones that are going to be retired without replacement as Airbus A318, Embraer 145, or CRJ 200. And there is clearly a reason for that. The most important one is called Cost Per Available Seat Mile, or CASM. It is a common unit of measurement unit used to compare the efficiency of various aircraft or airlines in general. In countries that use kilometers as their distance unit, so almost everywhere except for the US, this is called Cost Per Available Seat Kilometer. That's also why flights operated by regional jets or props are more expensive than those served by a medium-sized narrow-body. Let's see an example of a flight between New York and Boston that covers a distance of 162 nautical miles, or 186 miles, or 300 kilometers. The Embraer 145 would need 531 pounds of fuel, which means that consumption per seat stands at 110 pounds. To compare, the Airbus A320 in an all-economy layout would need slightly over 11,000 pounds overall and around 60 per seat, so nearly 2 times less than the regional jet. Now you can see the clear difference. The airlines simply prefer bigger jets as the cost per seat is lower. On routes that don't have enough demand to fill a large aircraft, tickets are simply more expensive. The need for small regional jets has thus become obsolete over time, with many carriers across the US retiring their fleets. Many airlines are also upgauging their fleet with larger capacity aircraft, such as the larger Embraer jets, such as Embraer 175 instead of 145, which provide lower costs per seat flown. You can observe another interesting situation with smaller variants of the popular aircraft. Let's start with Boeing 767-200. Deliveries for the variant totaled 128 aircraft, while the bigger version, the 767-300ER, was ordered 583 times. And this is only one example. Now take a look at Boeing 787-8, the smallest version of the popular Dreamliner. It was ordered 431 times, while larger 787-9 version 1227. So there is again a huge difference between those two. The same is also happening with Airbus A319neo, Boeing 737 MAX 7, or Airbus A220-100. What is the reason for that? Wouldn't airlines like to have smaller aircraft for routes that aren't so popular? The answer is again simple. The extra passengers and cargo that can fit on a larger version more than cover the additional operating costs. Also, with the Dreamliners, there is a second reason. The 787-8 was the first 787 variant, and due to this, it lacks commonality with the 787-9 and 787-10. The latter are 95% common, making production easy and cost-effective. The 787-8 is only roughly 30% common with the 787-9 because it's an older version, and many things that came to light during commercial service were upgraded with the introduction of the larger variant. Aircraft manufacturers like Airbus even want to introduce larger variants of current aircraft. For example, the company indicates that a larger third variant, tentatively called the A220-500, is a program likely to emerge in the future because it would offer complete family at the lower end of Airbus's product range. A stretched version of the A220 would also certainly be the most popular once introduced. When talking about the most popular aircraft, Boeing 737 and Airbus A320, airlines have also been favoring larger models like the A320neo or even A321neo and 737 MAX 8 over the smaller A319neo and 737 MAX 7. The increased passenger capacity and efficiency of the larger models simply make them more attractive for many routes and operations. Now, many people would argue that the video is not telling the truth, as wide-body aircraft are getting smaller instead of larger over time. And yes, they are mostly right. However, the reasons for this are slightly different. First, demand for long-haul intercontinental flights is obviously not as huge as for shorter ones. You can't also create artificial demand for longer trips, as is the case with domestic or short international ones. That phenomenon can often be observed in Europe, where Ryanair flies on routes where there is obviously no demand, but still manages to fill their planes with cheap tickets. The airlines that wanted to replicate that for transatlantic travel, like Norwegian, failed. I will definitely make a separate video about this in the future. People simply expect more comfort for a longer flight and are willing to pay more for it. That's why long-haul flights are almost exclusively operated in a hub-and-spoke model, where passengers are flown to a hub to later connect to a bigger aircraft. However, that is evolving over time, with airlines connecting smaller and smaller cities to their hubs. The aircraft like 787 or narrow-body A321XLR have enabled or will enable more point-to-point flying. This model is more convenient for passengers and opens up a variety of departure times. However, note that long-haul point-to-point flying will in almost all cases involve a hub on at least one side of the route. The new flights between two secondary cities that are not served yet are extremely unlikely, even with the XLR, for the limited demand reason that I mentioned before. In conclusion, yes, long-range planes are getting smaller. We no longer see a jumbo jet or an Airbus A380 in production. Instead, the A350 and 787 are dominating the market. But that happens because you cannot stimulate demand for intercontinental travel, and people just want more frequencies and route possibilities. Now let's get back to the smaller regional planes. Here, the smaller jets, as CRJ200, are successfully replaced by larger ones, with almost no change in the number of flights. This happens because the airline can offer cheaper tickets thanks to lower costs per seat, and the lower prices increase the demand as the basic economy principle works here. Finally, it's time to answer the question from the title. Why are aircraft getting bigger? Well, this happens mostly thanks to lower operating costs per seat. The airlines can simply offer slightly cheaper tickets and still make more profit from that. And this is getting more and more important as low-cost airlines are increasing their market share quickly, and airlines must adapt not to lose customers. The different story happens in the case of long-haul flights, where there are no cheap competitors and people expect more comfort instead. That's why airlines offer more flights and frequencies, but with smaller planes. Thanks for watching. Please like, support, and subscribe to my channel.